Hey, this is Zulem Urbina, and tune into the relay for the latest news in boxing all around the world. Thank you for supporting myself and other female boxers. We truly appreciate it.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
One last thing. Mikey Garcia said that DAZN couldn't afford the money to put on the Progress fight. Is there any truth to that?
No, not couldn't afford.
Didn't want to spend the money.
Didn't agree with the purses
With
that
the
they
demands.
wanted. Yeah. Okay. It's two different things.
Yeah.
I don't think DAZN have a problem affording anything. It's just they've become smarter, quite frankly, and they needed to be.
Yes.
Now, when they entered the US market, no one knew who DAZN was. Very few people knew who I was. We had to come in, overspend, make statements. Now they know the value of fights. When we go into a purse bid scenario, might be Lopez, Cambosos, we have a value of what we believe that fight is worth. We have a value of what we believe the Mikey Garcia Regis Prograis fight is worth. Unfortunately, they didn't agree, and we didn't agree, so we didn't do it. So I said, you haven't boxed for 19 months, let's come out, fight the biggest star in Spanish boxing, Sandor Martin, who headlines all our shows. Come back, and then we'll revisit Regis Prograis against Mikey Garcia once we look at the numbers for your fight with Sandor Martin.
Very recently, Mikey Garcia spoke to Fight Hype and stated in so many words that DAZN didn't have it in the budget to do the Prograis fight.
Right.
I didn't buy that explanation. I didn't buy that story. I'm of the opinion that what Mikey wanted...
Mikey Garcia wanted more than he's worth.
Based on that, in order to do the fight, DAZN would have had to pay out more than the value of the fight itself, more than the fight was worth. Because it's not just what Mikey wants, his purse demands, it's also what Regis Prograis wants for the fight as well. Hypothetically speaking, if Mikey Garcia is expecting a guaranteed purse of $6 or $7 million, you tack on what Regis wants for the fight. Maybe he wants $2 million, maybe he wants $3 million, and what you're looking at...
What's that, $10 million?
Roughly $10 million in guaranteed purses to the fighters. Tack on other operational costs for a non-title fight involving a fighter that hasn't even fought in the last 12 months, has no buzz, has no momentum at this time. You want my honest opinion? The reason the fight didn't get made...
Well, it's because Mikey priced himself out.
Mikey Garcia, who was paid a whopping $7 million for a Jesse Vargas fight early last year, pre-pandemic, is likely expecting a comparable number to that for a Prograis fight, because a Prograis fight is a more dangerous fight than a Vargas fight, and if they paid him $7 million to fight Jesse Vargas, what's the guy going to want for Prograis?
We talked about this in a previous video.
And I have serious reservations as to whether or not this fight will materialize. Will it happen at all? Because the idea is to send Mikey out there against Sandor Martin to better gauge what Mikey's market value is right now, and based on that, they'll cook up a number
DAZN will.
that makes sense to them as far as what that Mikey Garcia fight should cost them and what Mikey Garcia should make for the fight.
I don't think Mikey's gonna like that number.
The Regis Prograis fight was a dangerous fight before the Sandor Martin fight got announced, and it'll still be a dangerous fight after the Sandor Martin fight.
I don't know what they're paying Mikey to do that thing.
DAZN has tightened up their wallet since they first debuted in America. They're not frittering money away.
They're not overpaying for fights anymore.
They gave Mikey Garcia $7 million to fight Jesse Vargas because they had hopes they could do a Mikey Garcia versus Pacquiao fight afterwards. The pandemic hit, everything got all...
That fight didn't materialize.
Talked about that, how based on that $7 million that he got, that's likely affecting his judgment, his demeanor towards a Prograis fight. He's telling himself, if I got $7 million to fight a guy like Jesse Vargas, I've got to get at least that amount for a Prograis fight.
I'm speculating.
We don't know the exact number that Mikey wanted, but if I had to guess, I'd guess that he wants a number that's at or around 7 mil, somewhere around that neighborhood for a Regis Prograis fight. So let's call it an even $5 million. Let's say Mikey Garcia wants $5 million to fight Regis Prograis, and Regis likely wants, I don't know, 2 to 3 million?
So that'd be $8 million in guaranteed purses.
Just about. And I don't know that that's an $8 million fight. Tack on other operational costs, what the event is going to cost DAZN to put together overall.
Because they're not in the business of just giving money away.
Nobody is. You do a card, you do a fight, it's in the hopes that you'll turn over a profit. But how are you supposed to turn over a profit when the operational costs and the guaranteed purses are in this neighborhood? I don't know with any certainty that Mikey Garcia versus Regis Prograis is an $8 million fight. I mean, for starters, Mikey Garcia, Regis Prograis, these guys ain't even champions.
I wonder how much they're paying Mikey to fight Sandor Martin.
$1 million? $2 million? I can't imagine they'd spend $3 million. for that fight.
No commitment, no strings attached.
In the hopes of what? Mikey Garcia maybe fighting Regis Prograrius afterwards?
What are they paying this guy to fight Sandor Martin?
I don't know, $1 million? Maybe 2?
2 seems excessive.
The problem here is Mikey's purse demands exceed his market value, his actual market value, what he can generate, what he's actually good for. You got no belt, no world title, and you've been inactive for over 12 months, and you likely want something to the tune of, I don't know, maybe $5, $6, $7 million for a Prograis fight, and people at DAZN, they don't have any assurances that you can actually bring that back to them, and that's just your purse. Never mind what Regis wants for the fight.
They want to get paid more than they're worth.
And I don't know that that's going to change after the Sandor Martin fight.
Prograis fight's a risky fight.
Mikey Garcia's sole focus seems to be compensation for taking on such a fight, taking on such a risk, so much so that depending on how he's compensated, he won't bother to take it. It's basic arithmetic. This guy wants an arm and a leg to get out there and fight Regis Prograrius.
And if he can't get an arm and a leg, he'll fight a guy like Sandor Martin.
And that's why Mikey tried to shift the focus, shift the blame over to DAZN, saying that DAZN didn't have the money to do the fight. No, they got the money. They got plenty of money. They're just not going to pay you in excess of what you're actually worth. They're not going to pay you more than your market value, pay you more than what you're good for. It would defeat the purpose of doing the goddamn fight if it ends up costing them more money than they make from it.
And that's what would happen if they gave Mikey what he wanted.
They'd lose money doing it. They'd lose money on the fight. They'd lose money, and I don't think anybody's in the business of doing that. I don't think anybody's in the business of losing money.
These guys have got to be reasonable.
Mikey Garcia's not the only fighter that's guilty of this. I also happen to believe this is why Keith Thurman has sat out inactive for the last 2 years. Keith Thurman strikes me as a fighter who wants an arm and a leg to get out there. And the more he stays away from the ring,
The longer he sits out, the less that makes sense.
nobody's about to pay you an arm and a leg, buddy. You're not a world champion, and you haven't fought in a real long time, so you ain't got no buzz, no momentum. You're sitting around waiting for somebody to give you that arm and that leg, and you're gonna be sitting a while. And the longer you're sitting out,
The more you're depreciating in value.
and I think the same applies to Gary Russell Jr., WBC featherweight champion Gary Russell Jr., who actually is a titleist, unlike Mikey Garcia, unlike Keith Thurman.
Yeah, he's got a belt.
But he ain't got no buzz, and he's about as active as they are. Same kind of demands, though.
Eddie Hearn offered him $1 million to unify titles with Josh Warrington earlier this year.
He turns it down. He says it's beneath him, but sitting out inactive for roughly 9 going on 10 months into the year of 2021. That's right up his alley. That's what he prefers.
What's that, 19 months since his last fight?
19 months. That's just 5 months short of 2 years.
Been close to 2 years since this guy had a fight.
Not buzzing. He's not a blip on anyone's radar, but they're supposed to pay him an arm and a leg every time he gets out there. And this is why a lot of fights don't happen these days, at least here stateside. This is the state of American boxing. These guys, they can try to hide it, try to disguise it, but in the end, it's entitlement issues. A lot of entitlement, but not a lot of marquee value. That's what the holdup is.
And that's why DAZN didn't want to pay for Prograis versus Garcia.
Because it defeats the purpose of doing the fight if the operational costs of the fight exceed its marquee value, i.e., in layman's terms, it's more trouble than it's worth.
And so's Mikey Garcia.
In other news, it's the Sunday after Alexander Usyk's big upset win over the then reigning unified champion Anthony Joshua, and as you can imagine, this is going to reverberate through the boxing world for days and weeks and even months to come. As you can imagine, there's a lot to have to unpack here, and I think the first thing I want to address are the Monday morning quarterbacks.
Oh, there's always a few.
Not just in boxing, but in all of sports, really. Those guys who are chicken shits, those guys who are too scared to make a prediction leading up to a fight, but want to act like they knew what was going to happen the whole time post-fight. Myself, I've never been one to dodge my comeuppance. Alexander Usyk definitely proved me wrong. I wondered how he would manage the space and the real estate against the naturally bigger fighter who was perceived as having more power.
More physical advantages than he did.
Physically and politically. Anthony Joshua was the marquee fighter in this fight. He was the house fighter.
Usyk had a lot to overcome here.
And a lot of us, myself included, didn't think he could overcome Anthony Joshua under these circumstances, but he did, and many of us
Are actually happy for him.
even the guys like me that underestimated him.
The guy's a phenomenal fucking fighter.
What are you supposed to say?
You gotta give the guy his credit.
As he hasn't left us with much of a choice. Though there are those out there that would use this big upset win for Usyk as an opportunity to glorify themselves about an outcome they didn't even bother to call. You know, one guy that goes by the name of Paul Bell, the day before the fight, he predicted
He did.
a split decision win for Anthony Joshua, only so that the day of the fight, he could say he called it. Look at your last 5 video comments. Said Usyk would school him and took a lot of flack for it.
Flack from who?
The day before the fight, this is the same guy that predicted an Anthony Joshua split decision win, only so that the day of the fight, he can play the victim.
Who gave you flack for picking Usyk to win when you didn't pick him?
You picked Anthony Joshua, like most people.
What do you got, Alzheimer's?
Or are you really that big a clown to try to seek validation and vindication for a prediction you didn't even make?
This guy can't be fucking serious.
This guy claims he picked Usyk to win and said as much in the comments under my last 5 videos here on the channel. So in true Ring IQ fashion, I did the legwork, I did the research. And nowhere in those last 5 videos does Paul Bell claim that Usyk is going to beat Anthony Joshua. Yet Paul Bell says...
Called it and got a lot of flack for it. Fuck you, amateurs.
What the fuck's wrong with this guy? Literally lying about calling the outcome of the fight and presuming to gloat.
Monday morning quarterbacks.
Oh yeah, they knew the whole time. They just don't bother to tell anyone until after the fight. And he's not the only one. A guy that goes by the name of Leroy left me 2 very lengthy paragraphs, 2 very lengthy comments in the comment section of my last video. And you know, as I read through this, I thought to myself, I wonder if this guy had this much to say about what he thought about the outcome of the fight before the fight.
Because he seems to be gloating.
I thought to myself, in all my wisdom, I says,
What?
This is clearly a guy that's got a lot on his mind, and he's got a lot to say. I'm just wondering...
Is this another Monday morning quarterback?
Because this guy, like the last guy, not only is he gloating, but he's being particularly obnoxious about it. And I wonder if this guy, being as obnoxious as he is that even warranted when I myself didn't speak to this guy at any point leading up to this fight. So it's not like we had a back and forth debate in reference to the subject. I review the comments left under...
In my prediction videos.
I revised the comments under all of those videos to see if I can find all of Leroy's know-how.
He was nowhere to be found.
Mr. Know-It-All that didn't know it all until after the fight was nowhere to be found in the comments under those videos.
No prediction from Leroy.
No prediction and no paragraphs from the guy who's got so much to say after the fight but was quiet as a church mouse leading up to the fight.
Oh, gee, I wonder why that is.
Could it be because you're too big of a chicken shit? Too big of a pussy to actually make a prediction?
Could it be because you were scared you'd get it wrong?
Could it be because you were too scared to have to stand by your own word ahead of the fight in the event that you got it wrong and it didn't work out the way you thought it would work out? Could it be that you're too big of a chicken shit and too big of a pussy to make a prediction, so you're going to pretend you did after the fight?
Do us all a favor and shut the fuck up.
Just shut the fuck up. What the fuck are you gloating about? You didn't call the outcome of the fight, and you didn't have all that much to say leading up to it.
You fucks didn't have the balls to say anything.
You couldn't find your cojones till afterwards, so you could pretend to be Mr. Know-It-All that didn't know it all.
There's a lot of people like this.
I wanted to be sure of what I was dealing with, so I went back to those 2 prediction videos where I talked about the fight ahead of the fight, about what I thought might happen. And, you know, I couldn't find Mr. Leroy anywhere in the comments of those videos.
Talkative guy was nowhere to be found.
I saw 1 or 2 guys that got the outcome of the fight right. Credit to those guys, because they actually had the cojones to make a prediction, where it's Mr. Paul Bell and Leroy, a few others. They didn't. So you don't get to gloat. You don't get to say I told you so when you didn't tell anybody anything.
You rat bastard.
I mean, what kind of fucking loser has to pretend they called the outcome of the fight when you too big of a chicken shit to even make a prediction? You've got guys coming out of the woodworks saying I told you so when they didn't tell anybody anything. These guys were nowhere to be found before the fight, so they could turn around and try to gloat after the fight.
Hey, I got the receipts.
Most of these obnoxious fucks shooting off at the mouth in the comments of my last video were nowhere to be found leading up to the fight. I mean, why weren't you as talkative then, when it counted?
Well, because you're too big a pussy to make a prediction.
And the only place where social rejects like you guys can seek refuge is the internet, because you think on the internet you can get away with this stuff.
No, you can't, because I've got receipts.
And I could spend all day talking about guys like this. Though Monday morning quarterbacks aside, I actually got a lot of flack for how I had the fight. I thought it was closer than the judges, though I do think Usyk did enough to win. Sonny Edwards, he had a very, very close fight as well, and he chalked up a lot of people's attitudes towards the fight as an anti-AJ agenda. Julian Williams, former unified junior middleweight champion Julian Williams, he thought it was a close fight as well.
And these are professionals.
One thing is clear to me, at least one thing. Alexander Usyk's legacy is sealed as a cruiserweight undisputed champion and a now unified heavyweight champion, he enters a very short list of fighters.
You can count on one hand.
You can count on one hand how many cruiserweight champions have moved up to heavyweight to do what he did. And it's not a long list. I think that Alexander Usyk has made history for himself and for Ukrainian boxing, made history in a way that will be very hard to duplicate. This is a monumental win, but not to two-time Mickey Mouse champion Gervonta Davis, who after the fight took to social media to express that he wasn't impressed.
But you think fighting for Reggie belts is impressive?
Swerving all of your contemporaries, what formidable fighters are out there for you to fight, and hiding behind Leonard Ellerby's skirt, his nostrils rather. You think we're supposed to be impressed with that?
What the fuck is impressive about Gervonta Davis?
I think this comment from Gervonta Davis is a comment that we're going to have to revisit, as there is a lot to unpack there in reference to that as well.
Jackass.
The most I can say about Alexander Usyk's win is that it's really not an indictment on Anthony Joshua. It's not that Anthony Joshua isn't a good fighter. He's a good fighter. Otherwise, why would beating him matter?
It wouldn't.
The reactions aren't the same, the reception, and it is this way for a reason. You don't get the reaction beating a Chaz Witherspoon or a Derek Chisora that you get for beating an Anthony Joshua, and it's because beating Anthony Joshua means that much more to the sport.
It means that much more for your legacy.
Look, if you want to know what I think, and you're here, so I'll assume that you do. It's not that Anthony Joshua is not a good fighter. He's a good fighter, but Alexander Usyk has proven to be a great fighter.
A once-in-a-lifetime fighter.
Because how many cruiserweight champions do you see moving up to heavyweight and doing what Alexander Usyk just did? How many do you see in this era and the previous era? He's part of a very short list of fighters that has achieved a monumental achievement. Thus, losing this fight really isn't an indictment on Anthony Joshua. It's just a testament to Usyk's greatness. And regardless of what happens in a potential rematch between them, if Anthony Joshua actually can rebound off this loss and figure out the way to solve the puzzle that is Alexander Usyk.
Can he?
Regardless of what happens with that.
Usyk's made history.
That's because he's a great fighter. You got a lot of people right now taking shots at Anthony Joshua, saying a guy, he was never any good to begin with.
They're writing him off again.
Whether it's resentful Wilderettes who have always hated Anthony Joshua, resentful Tyson Fury fans, that faction of freaks.
The Eastern Euro butt boys.
The guys that get a hard-on for any fighter that's got a couple of consonants in their name.
Usyk fanboys.
Everybody's got an agenda, and everybody's an opportunist. And they're using this as an opportunity to say that Anthony Joshua was never any good. But if he was never any good, then why would beating him matter? If he was never any good, what kind of wager did you know-it-alls place with your bookies?
Surely you saw this coming.
Because he was never any good.
Did you put your money where your mouth is?
Or did you, like many others, wait until after the fight, well after the fight, to start making all of these proclamations, all of these hot takes?
Man, shut the fuck up.